go. Oh, thank you. Excellent. All right, well, good morning, everyone. We are at the end of week 13. Hard to believe, but we are here on the final Friday of the 2026 session and our final press conference for the year. So first and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you all for being here and bearing through these last 13 weeks. We appreciate your coverage of this important work, especially at this time in the world. From the beginning, we hit the ground running, and we had a bold agenda here in the Senate. We focused on what matters most to Marylanders: affordability for families, growing our economy, and protecting the state from the harmful effects of this federal administration. Simply put, growth, affordability, and protecting Marylanders have guided our work every single step of the way. I'm immensely proud of this leadership team behind me and their contributions towards helping everyday Marylanders. From finance to JPR to EEE to the Budget and Tax Committee, these committees have been the bulwark moving through the Senate's priorities. I thank the President Pro Tem, Malcolm Augustine, our Majority Leader, Nancy King, for their steadfast leadership helping to guide this chamber. I also want to thank each member of the Senate Democratic Caucus, especially our caucus chair who's with us today, Craig Zucker. Collectively, this leadership team has ensured that the Senate continues to be a thoughtful and deliberative body. We account for the needs of all 6 million Marylanders who live across this state. In our Senate agenda, and because we knew Maryland was one of the most vulnerable states in the country with changes from the federal administration, we focused on growth. We made targeted investments to strengthen Maryland's economy and create opportunities across every single region of the state. We're building a future economy that is innovative and adaptive by leaning into Maryland's unique assets, like our port, our highway infrastructure, and our globally leading airport. We did this by creating a Future Fund Board, whose sole mission is to envision the challenges, potential, and ideals of Maryland's future, to imagine where we want to be in the future and fund the projects that will help us to get there. We increased capital investments for Maryland's advanced technology and manufacturing companies, who face huge hurdles with startup costs and often can't get enough capital to make the investments they need to take things to scale. And third, we established Maryland Launch to provide free training to workers with targeted industries to move Maryland forward, because we know that our greatest asset in this state are our people. At a time when Maryland families have felt squeezed in ways like never before, we've taken significant steps to make Maryland more affordable. We work to lower costs where it matters most, from housing, healthcare, to everyday expenses, while maintaining fiscal discipline and sustaining our long-term stability. We did that, number one, by lowering utility bills, which we will pass on Monday with the Utility Relief Act of 2026. We passed permit reform to make it easier and more streamlined to build new housing in Maryland. We made it easier to find job training and volunteer opportunities to fulfill work requirements for Medicaid and SNAP. Maryland asked us to respond with real solutions, and we did. We also recognize that many Marylanders are concerned about decisions that are being made at the federal level, understandably so. During this session, we took significant steps to protect our values and our people from harmful federal actions. First, we ensured our immigrant communities have due process, curtailing engagement with ICE and prohibiting masking for law enforcement. We've required social media companies to disclose where accounts are located and prohibit social media companies from manipulating the algorithms to achieve electoral outcomes. And third, we passed the Maryland Voting Rights Act to protect historically vulnerable communities. I'm also pleased to announce that we have reached agreement on the Community Trust Act. This legislation will ensure due process when people are charged with a crime while balancing the absolute need for public safety. Whether it's safeguarding healthcare access, defending critical funding, or ensuring that Maryland remains a place of opportunity and fairness, we made it clear we will not stand by as Marylanders are put at risk. I want to note that while we've made tremendous progress this session, there are several important issues that remain outstanding with our counterparts in the House of Delegates. We must make sure to support our main streets by allowing local governments to provide tax credits to those businesses. We must make sure to protect our most vulnerable, like the women who have given birth to stillborn children who are unable to receive a live birth tax credit. And we have people who are looking to be productive members of our communities, but who struggle because of old criminal offenses. The Clean Slate Act would give so many Marylanders the assistance they need to continue to move forward in their lives. This was a session defined by results. We still have a bit to go, but I am incredibly proud of where we are. Together, we're going to continue building Maryland and make sure that we are growing, we are more affordable, and we are protecting this state from the harmful effects of the Trump administration. Now I'd like to hand it over to a friend and colleague, someone who is going to be enjoying her last Friday of session, someone who, when I first stepped into this role as Senate President, she was one of my early conversations, and we sat at a restaurant and had a discussion about what the world would look like. And without hesitation, she threw her support behind me in a way that gave me a level of confidence that I didn't know that I had, because that's what she does for every single member. She is unbelievably talented, experienced, thoughtful, hardworking, and someone that I have learned so much from on an every single day basis, the incredible chair of the Finance Committee, Pam Beidle.
You're going to start me crying. Good morning, everyone. I don't have much to add after the Senate President really covered the great work that we did this year. But I do want to talk a little bit about our committees. The Senate Finance Committee had 274 Senate bills this year. We passed almost 70%, and we're still voting today. And as of April 8th, we had almost 60% of the 204 bills that came over from the House. And this could not happen without, number one, the great counsel that we have. I have 3 of the best attorneys on our committee that work really hard and produce just amazing work. And my committee, almost every bill that we pass is a nonpartisan vote, so or a bipartisan vote. So I think it says a lot about the committee members that we work with. So we're still working on a few bills. We finally got workplace fraud back yesterday from the House, and we're working on a few amendments. My next meeting will be to try to finish up that bill. I think we'll have the votes today. Dynamic pricing, which was one of the governor's bills that we met about before session even started. I think we've worked out everything on dynamic pricing, and hopefully the House will agree with us. And a bill that I really supported and was happy came to my committee this year is the transit-oriented development. I think it's one way that we really can support additional housing and help the cost of housing in our communities. I happen to have a number of sites in Anne Arundel County that are going to be prime for transit-oriented development. Still have a few things outstanding. There's a cannabis regulation bill about advertising that we're still waiting for, as well as an administration cannabis bill. And electronic smoking devices was something that was very important to me, as we have a lot of tobacco stores selling illegal products, not taxing properly, selling to youth. And it's a bill that I've worked with Mr. Kelly from ATCC to really try to increase enforcement. So that's some of the bills we're still waiting to come across. Safe staffing finally passed the committee yesterday, and we did some collective bargaining this year that I know is really important to our workforce. So I really thank all of you for your support and covering the stories of the good work we do, and I'm looking forward to retirement. And with that, I'd like to introduce the chair of JPR that I admire so much for the work he's done, Senator Will Smith.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I see one of you in here is giving the side eye because I didn't get back to your text message this morning, but I promise I'll get back to you. First, I want to thank the Senate President and the leadership team for providing a sense of stability and civility in the Senate. We've really grown into our shoes this year in the Senate and have really helped stabilize statewide leadership. So I just want to say thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the leadership team and to Senator Chair Beidle. It's been a real honor and pleasure serving with you. You've been a great mentor to all of us, and it's been a pleasure to serve alongside you. So I'm glad you're going to be enjoying your retirement, but it's going to be really sad to see you go, and it's a real loss for us. So thank you for your service and leadership. In the Judicial Proceedings Committee, I think the issues connect so well with people all across the state because unlike almost any other committee in the General Assembly, from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, the issues that come before our committee decide how you're going to move through your day. So from how fast you can drive on the road, divorce, marriage, how much you'll get for a certain crime, how much liability you'll be exposed to for your negligence, what protections you have as a renter, the manner in which you can transfer your most valuable asset, which is your home, to how you'll be treated in foster care, to public safety, to safety in your schools. The entire gambit of your day connects directly to the work that we have in our committee, and I think that's why the issues are so emotional and so difficult. And so I want to say first, just thank you to every member of the Judicial Proceedings Committee this year, because we've had a really intense year full of really controversial and emotional issues, and it takes a toll on you. So I just want to say thank you to the members that give their best every single day to produce good product for the citizens of Maryland. Every year in the Judicial Proceedings Committee seems to have a theme, and I've dubbed this year's theme as the sneaky big deal year, because we did a lot of really big things that kind of have gone unnoticed, or there's so much going on in the world, but is not in any other year would have been headliner marquee bills and would have taken up a lot more press time. But this is really a sneaky big deal year. For public safety, we've got the Glock switch bill that we passed out. That was Senator Love, did fantastic work on that. We extended the time and duration for protective orders to protect survivors of domestic violence. We addressed deepfake and identity fraud, which is an evolving technology that the law has not caught up to. Senator Hester did fantastic work with that. We added protections for seniors for benefits exploitation. In housing, we allowed for positive rental history to be accounted for credit. For low-income renters that don't have access to other means to build credit, this is a foundational tool to help them get a leg up in the economy. We passed a transfer on deed tool that will make it easier for low-income homeowners to transfer their assets and maintain generational wealth. Senator Henson did fantastic work on that. We passed the Safe and Healthy Homes Act, which is another Senator Henson bill that helps us and helps empower the Attorney General to go after landlords that fail to provide safe and quality housing throughout the state of Maryland. We passed fair housing protections at Senator Sidnor. In immigration, we've done the 287G brand. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Community Trust Act later on this afternoon. Anti-masking, holding immigration officials accountable for violating your constitutional rights. We've done fantastic work in the area of immigration. And then finally, in justice reform, we curtailed the practice of automatically charging youths as adults. We fundamentally changed parole in Maryland. The biggest overhaul of our parole system since parole has been a thing in the state of Maryland happened this year. Sneaky big thing. We also ensured that juries reflect the communities that they serve. So we've done fantastic work. Every member of the Judicial Proceedings Committee has given their level best to help Marylanders throughout this session, and I wanted to say thank you to all of you for covering our work and for being critical and understanding the nuance of the work, because oftentimes it's easy to get lost in just a headline. You all do fantastic work, and so I want to say thank you to all as well. And with that, I'll conclude and turn it over to my colleague and friend, Senator Brian Filton.
All right, thank you, Will Smith. Let me just start by echoing the comments about Senator Bidle. Now, one of the things is when you sit next to somebody on the floor for 3 straight years, you really get to know somebody, and you actually tell each other what you're really thinking. You don't have to be, you can be completely unfiltered. So I really feel like I know her well. She's fantastic. She's gonna be sorely missed. And so congratulations to you, Senator Bidle. She knows all the skeletons now. Okay, well, I would say Triple E had another very productive session. I think I've mentioned this at prior press conferences. We have very broad jurisdiction. We considered close to 500 bills, about 290 bills in the Senate. We're up to about 185 House bills. Let me highlight a few. The Senate President touched on some of them, and we're finishing strong. Even just this week we passed, I'm gonna highlight on the education front, just this week we passed the Compass Act, which alters statutes governing how public school performance is measured and reported. This is critical in ensuring the educational accountability of Maryland's public schools, ultimately helping the State Department of Education get a more accurate picture of where our public schools can be improved. Another hot topic that's been discussed over the past several years has to do with cell phone use in our schools. And Triple E did pass Senate Bill 928, which is now called the Joanne C. Benson Maryland Phone-Free Schools Act, amended to honor Senator Joanne C. Benson and the work she has done over the years on this issue. It requires every local board of education to develop and implement a policy that will prohibit the use of cell phones in schools by the 2027 school year. And in developing the policy, the boards of education will engage families in the process, publicize the policies that are adopted, and then report those policies to the Maryland State Board of Education, which will publish each of the county's policies on their website. Also this week, Two key child care scholarship bills passed out of EEE. House Bill 849 prohibits freezing the enrollment of students in the child care scholarship program who are also in government support programs and gives enrollment priority to individuals in similar circumstance. We passed also this week a companion bill, HB 1321, which identifies, assists, and limits the co-pays of applicants for the child care scholarship program. By prioritizing supporting applicants with the greatest financial need in these two bills, Maryland moves forward with leveling the playing field for our children and equitably distributes its resources. On the energy front, the Senate President did touch on it. The Utility Relief Act, I do want to say that it seems like an eternity ago. It was just on Monday of this week that we passed the Senate version of the bill on a 38-4 vote. That came after a 9-1 bipartisan vote in the EEE committee. Obviously, we're finalizing crossing the T's and dotting the I's on an agreement which the Senate President's indicated will likely roll out on Monday. And that's obviously took up a tremendous amount of time, very, very comprehensive 100-page bill. I think enough's been written and said about that. I'm not going to belabor that one. On the environmental front, Maryland farmers have long relied on biosolids and other soil amendments as essential tools for maintaining soil health, supporting crop productivity, and promoting sustainable agricultural practice. At the same time, farmers in the state are increasingly aware of and concerned about the long-term negative risk associated with PFAS contamination in the wastewater from which biosolids are produced. EEE did pass Senate Bill 719 from Senator Love, establishes safeguards to prevent biosolids from introducing harmful levels of PFAS into the agricultural systems of our state. And at the same time, the bill gives local governments, the Department of Environment, the tools they need to address PFAS loading to municipal wastewater systems at the source. On the housing front, I do want to give a shout out to Senator Augustine, obviously a lot's been written about our housing affordability and supply challenge caused by a shortage of about 100,000 housing unit shortage. One of the biggest issues identified is the need in our state for more regulatory certainty, particularly when you compare how things are done in some of our neighboring states who are permitting far more housing units. Developers need to know that the laws and the regulations governing permitting aren't going to be changed years after the project gets started. So Senate Bill 325 from Senator Augustine, the Maryland Housing Certainty Act, is a very, very important bill that we passed. I will also note, and I think Senator Bottle did mention, we were the second on the Senate Bill 389, the Administration's Maryland Transit and Housing Opportunity Act, which was the lead committee was Finance. And then also Senate Bill 829, the Bring Back Main Street Act, which requires the Department of Housing Community Development study and make recommendations regarding strategies to encourage the development of housing in commercial areas. And then finally, on the election front, I've said this at the prior press conference, we, for the third straight year, did pass a special election bill, how we're going to fill legislative vacancies. We send it over there clean. We thought this was going to be a year to get it done. Unfortunately, the House sent us back a bill with totally, completely unrelated amendments, and so I think that are problematic, unfortunately. And then finally, I will also, the Senate Bill 255, I think the Senate President mentioned the Voting Rights Act of 2026, emergency bill that will guarantee and protect the rights of Maryland minorities to participate in the democratic process. So with that, it was a very busy session, I think a very productive, successful session, and I'm going to turn it over to Senator Craig Zucker on behalf of the Budget and Taxation Committee.
Well, good morning, everybody. First, it's such an honor to be up here with such amazing leaders, including the Senate President. I wanted to join my colleagues in saluting Chair Bidle. You know, Madam Chair, if you want, I can call you every day of next year's session just to make sure you don't feel like you're missing anything. Yeah. But this is the part of session where we're now in the sprint instead of the marathon. And from the start, the Senate of Maryland has been focused on lowering costs, growing the economy, and protecting Marylanders against a reckless Trump administration. Toward these goals, a few days ago, the governor signed the Maryland state budget into law. The budget is balanced and left us with a considerable surplus. We did this all without raising taxes. We tackled rising utility costs. We're growing areas of the economy, supporting Maryland families and small mom and pop businesses, and have protected Marylanders against an overreaching Trump administration. I know I've said this many times, But it's important to note that the state's capital budget creates and maintains thousands of Maryland jobs and is the state's largest infrastructure bill. The capital budget will build and renovate schools, colleges, universities, hospitals, fire and police stations, museums, improve access to affordable housing, and preserve Maryland's history. From a Democratic caucus perspective, we have worked collaboratively with all those, regardless of political affiliation, who wanted to offer relief and support to Marylanders. The caucus took a One Maryland approach where we invested in all and every jurisdiction in the state. Our engagement demonstrates reasonableness and reflects how government should work. From the start, we knew we needed to control costs, grow the economy, and protect Marylanders. As a result, promises made, promises kept.
Thank you, sir. Well said. Well said. It's funny. Just reflecting as we were heard each of members of the leadership rattle through some of the bills. In any other given year, any one of those issues could have been a headline issue. So the sneaky big deal is probably the best summary of all of the things we knew we had to come into this year and deliver, and we did. And so I'm really proud of the work we were able to get done. So, questions.
Chairman Feldman, you mentioned the special elections bill. There still is a House companion bill that is sitting out there. Are there any negotiations or attempts to get the House to send that bill over clean and move it quickly?
I mean, I don't think there's that much to negotiate. That bill is actually one of my delegate teammates, Delegate Foley. It's there. It's sitting there clean. I don't think there's a lot to negotiate. Again, we've passed the exact same bill 3 straight years. It's sitting there. They could pass that bill and we'd be done. And so I don't think there's much, I don't know what there is to negotiate exactly.
Let me rephrase a little more pointedly then. Are you or anybody on the committee having conversations with your companions in the House and asking them to move that bill in the next couple of days?
I mean, I have had some conversations with Delegate Moon, and I think our view is just pass the bill clean. The unfortunate thing about it is because this is a constitutional amendment, and so by not doing it this year, the earliest then we can move to legislative vacancy special elections is going to be like 2030 or 2032 by virtue of this bill not passing this year because it has to go on the ballot. And it's really, again, delaying by multiple years not getting it done. So Monday at 11:59, we still have time. And my hope is that they'll send over the Foley bill and we'll be done.
Chair Vital, I have a couple questions for dynamic pricing really quick. On the technical front, I believe that the House version included a provision that would require non-food retailers to disclose if they are using dynamic pricing. Was that adopted by the Senate?
No, it was not.
Okay. And then as far as, there was also provision, I can't remember which bill, but which version, but it would ban electronic shelving labels entirely. Also, was that?
It's not in the Senate version.
Okay, great. And then my last question is overarching. That's pushed as one of the largest affordability bills of the session, and I feel like usually whenever the governor or proponents of the bill are asked specifically, is this really a problem in Maryland? Where are we seeing this? We usually get an answer that we've seen evidence of big box stores and Instacart doing this, but do you have any specific data, or are you seeing anything that we're not about this being a prevalent problem in Maryland?
You know, I didn't think it was a prevalent problem, but there was a poll done just before session started, and of all the things that people listed, it was the 3rd most important issue to them that we addressed dynamic pricing. So that was a surprise to me, but I do think it's an important issue.
Question for Chair Smith. On District Court Commissioner reform, can you describe where JPR has landed on that bill?
Yes, so we'll be voting on that bill in between sessions today. So we are still in negotiations, but generally speaking, we are going to curtail that practice or end that practice involving the state's attorneys, making sure that there's ample time for them to respond to a warrant or a request for a citation. So that's where we are. We'll be voting on it in between sessions this year.
So is that the major change from the House version, is the amount of time that the state's attorney has to review?
So I think they came in with 72 hours. We are probably looking at changing it as soon as practicable because for some of the smaller jurisdictions, they just don't have the actual person power to get it done. We want to make sure that obviously everyone remains safe. So there are other avenues when there's an exigent circumstance or a public safety threat, you can call the police. But if you do decide to go and exercise this route, so it's going to be an attorney available or a judge available to review that request and move forward. So we're looking forward to passing that bill in a couple hours here.
Thank you. Chair Smith or Senate President, I know that later we're going to hear more from you about the community trust. But a couple of questions just about the overarching, I guess, how did we go from nothing to now and moving forward with this plan? I guess how did we decide that this was the time to move forward on this specific bill? And is there any concern that with the 287G ban bill and the No Kings Act, that this will put in a bigger target on Maryland when it comes to immigration enforcement? I know that's been a conversation we've had throughout session, but does this really raise that to a concern for you?
No, I mean, we had those conversations last session, and the parade of horribles that we were afraid of have all come to fruition. And so it's incumbent upon us to act decisively to protect people in Maryland. This bill that we're going to be putting forward is all premised on due process and public safety. And so without getting to the details, which will be developed a little bit later on this afternoon, that's where we've moved. So the first step was the 287G piece. The second step is really focused on due process and public safety.
Could you tell us, either Chair Smith or Mr. President, could you tell us why is it important for Maryland to draw this line between what local law enforcement can and can't do in regards to federal immigration?
Again, at a very high level, and Mr. President, I'll leave to you, but at a very high level, one of the benefits of implementing a statewide policy is that all 24 jurisdictions can move together, and you're not going to get different due process in Howard County or Montgomery County or wherever you are. So that's an important thing that every Marylander knows. The same rules apply everywhere. It's also an important statement for the state of Maryland to make, to say that we are going to push back, we are going to fight back against unconstitutional, unethical exercises of federal encroachment and power, and say that we protect everyone's due process rights. It's who we are as Marylanders, and that's an important statement for us to make, and it's an important public safety policy for us to implement.
What do you say to law enforcement officers and leaders who are concerned that this is going to limit their ability to enforce public safety?
Again, at a very high level, this will not curtail their ability to enforce public safety. The normal reins of the criminal justice system will always and to continue to apply under this bill.
To piggy off of,
Can I just add really quick? I just want to say, I want to be very, very clear that this policy upholds Maryland values. When you ask Marylanders what is most important, it's that we treat our neighbors with respect and due process and justice. And so that's what this policy is about. The reason that it's so important right now is that we cannot go another year like we have in the last year, where we have disparate impacts across the state. We need a single statewide standard about what Maryland values are when it comes to engagement with ICE officials.
To piggyback off of Brenda's first question, I know a concern among Republicans when the 287G bill was passed was that there would be no uniformity. Why was that not addressed in the 287G bill to begin with? Why take this, why split the steps into it?
Well, I think we added a couple of protective measures. So after we passed the 287G ban, what we heard were some local officials outright discussing about how they were going to defy the law. That's not acceptable, and that was a small minority. I just want to be very clear. Most law enforcement officials said that this would be something that would actually enhance public safety, because what we know, what's important here, is that public safety exists when you have trust within the community with law enforcement officials. And where we've seen vast majority of reductions in crimes, it's where areas where trust has been improved and enhanced, because when somebody breaks the law, you can bring a case and you have witnesses that hold people accountable. When there is not trust, people don't come forward, they don't report crimes, and crime perpetuates. What we are doing with these policies is ensuring that every community in Maryland has real protection, that they don't fear talking to a police officer because of what question they might ask next. And so as we saw through this session play out, once some of the local officials indicated their deep desire to defy some of the rules and regulations that we've put forward, we thought that it was essential to have a statewide standard.
Mr. President, while I still have you, yesterday I noticed during the evening session on the floor, you, and I am paraphrasing, said the House is out, which I don't understand. Are you feeling a little tension with the amount of work that the House is doing?
Look, this is the end of session where everybody's feeling a little bit stretched. We have a lot of things still have to work through. In the last 3 days, I feel confident that we'll navigate it moving forward. And I've had great conversations with the Speaker. I think we're going to be on the same page in these last 3 days.
This year's budget's obviously no tax increases, no fee increases. Next year's budget, is there a commitment to revisit the blueprint? Is there a commitment now to revisit formulas?
Well, of course there is on the blueprint, because we put in the law a 5-year check-in. that when we passed the blueprint in 2020, we said halfway through the implementation, it's important for us to, and this was a Senate-led initiative, to have a check-in point both on the fiscal sustainability and on the outcomes. There's not a single program out there that is passed that's 10 years implementation that we don't adjust along the way. And so, of course, we will respond and use this reflection period halfway through its implementation to make changes that are necessary to enhance the program. I would never predispose what those changes may be. I think we're going to use the data and facts to drive the decision-making, but of course, we are going to navigate the changes as are necessary.
And as far as the formulas are concerned, not in addition to the blueprint, the governor has stated publicly, at least to us, that he needs change in formula in order to have more flexibility in his budget balancing.
Yeah, one of the big questions, and we've been saying this a lot, is in 2022, we radically changed how our budget making is done. And we added an authority for the legislative branch to be able to add money to the budget to specific programs. That was a fundamental alteration of how budgets function in the state of Maryland. We have not changed the underlying processes of mandates and formulas. And so that is one of the big issues that we're going to be taking up in the next term is what does it mean for the legislature to have this new power? Can we adjust our formulas such that we are not having to have a formula that has a maximum amount that we have to cut? Rather, what is necessary and what can we add when we have surpluses?
Mr. President, going back to the Community Trust Act, I know that when the 287G ban bill was signed into law, the governor sent out guidance to local leaders and law enforcement saying that there could still be coordination with ICE in some capacity, in some fashion. How does this still fall in line with that guidance?
The bill that the committee moved forward is, it is a balance that makes it clear that there is still going to be communication when it comes to violent crimes. Public safety is important. However, what we don't want are minor little crimes being used as pretext to round people up and send them to ICE. And that is what we are seeing in places across the state. And so this is a balanced approach that is fair, upholds our values, and ensures that we have real public safety.
Mr. President, going back to your conversation just a second ago about budgetary powers, I was on the floor 2 years ago when Chair Gazone stood up and told members of the Senate, hey, we're going to start going through everything with a fine-tooth comb, start pulling out these mandates, start really determining. It sounds like we're still in the same place we were 2 years ago. So what is the hurdle that has faced the legislature in terms of unraveling these mandates?
I would say I reject the premise and think that it is not accurate. I think what you've seen coming out of the Budget and Tax Committee is a consistent commitment to not adding new mandates to programs. And so what you are seeing are a lot of may fund, not shall fund, in any new program that comes, because there is a new ability that if it's a priority and it's working, we can add additional funding. What we have to do is look at the statutory programs that existed previously and adjust those that are the larger cases around healthcare, education, public safety, environment. These are all important values. And we're not saying get rid of formulas. What we're saying is we need to take a fine-tooth comb and look at how can we best reflect the new budgeting system and new powers that we have.
Respectfully, the premise of my question that you rejected really dealt with the existing mandates and unraveling those existing mandates. And it seems like we're still kind of working through that.
We are. I mean, I think I think we are.
What's been the hurdle then? That's what I'm trying to get at, is what's been the hurdle in unraveling those 2 years later?
I mean, we have a $70 billion budget. There are, we were talking about decades of history of investing in people and protecting the most vulnerable amongst us. This is not something you do on the fly. It's something that takes thoughtful consideration. I think that you've seen the Budget and Tax Committee make a consistent effort to be thoughtful in their approach. And I think that over the next term, we have a unique opportunity now that we've gone through a single full term with this new statutory authority, constitutional authority. Now we have a better sense of how to adjust these larger programs in the term ahead.
We can do one more, guys. Go ahead,
Sorry, Mr. President, kind of going off of Hannah's question about it's just kind of like the time of the session where everybody's feeling antsy. How would you describe the relationship between the House and the Senate? This session, obviously, there's new leadership in the House, and we've also heard from both senators and delegates kind of telling us that they feel like some of their bills are being heard until the opposing chamber takes up their bill, stuff like that. This is obviously my first session, as everybody knows. So is this the normal place that we are in the session? How would you describe the relationship?
You defined the every end of session. It is like this every year. And so anytime we think that it might not be, it is. This is just how it goes. I would say we're having very thoughtful, great conversations. We passed the budget early. The Utility Relief Act is going to be done early on Monday. If you go back a year ago, we had the budget and the BRFA and the capital budget all passed on the last day of session. At this point, a year later, here we are, we've already signed them all into law. And so I think that's a sign of how we have been navigating these very challenging times. And I would say the reason is because we all see the existential threat that exists at the federal level. The House and the Senate, every member feels the burden of what this moment means with a federal administration that will start a war on a dime. And so I think that we are fully committed to making sure that we use the tools that we have to protect Marylanders from a federal administration that has been truly lawless at times.
Mr. President.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.